Right. Hey everybody, this is Doc Mack from the Galloping Ghost Arcade out in Brookfield, Illinois. Today is Wednesday, September 25th, 2019, and I am joined here today by former Gamer of the Year, Pete Hahn, along with our special guest, former Gamer of the Year, Matt Walters.
Hello. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for having me.
Yep.
Thanks everybody for joining us on Twitch and Facebook 3 weeks in a row.
It's a world record.
Is it 3?
That's definitely a world record.
Yeah.
Unheard of.
Arcade world record, at least.
Verifiable?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
There's video.
There is video? Okay,
Yeah, for
good.
every 3 times there's video. Yeah. So yeah, we've got a few topics. Do you want to start with the scoring like we normally used to, or what do you want to start with?
Let's start with scoring.
Okay.
We've got some scores. I know, as always good scores going in.
Let me bring up Arcade. There's a few, and I apologize because I haven't done the kudos post like I normally do. So we're going back just about a week now. In that last week, we've had Larry Brockie set a new house record, or world record, on JoJo's Venture. That was
a recent Monday mystery game that's getting a lot of attention.
We also had James White beat all the Monday mystery scores on 2 Crude. I think he came in last Wednesday as we were recording and did that.
Yeah.
And then Andrew with a new Moon Shuttle record. He did 41,660, which is I think almost 3 loops of the game.
Yeah.
So it's a really good score.
And you had a couple scores as well.
I do have a couple. Yeah.
The Guerrilla War score was particularly impressive. You beat Martin Bedard, didn't you?
Yes, and in my mind, there's a little bit of controversy about this because we don't know what settings he played on.
Oh.
The manual, if you look at the manual, that's both on Arcade, it's the same scan that's on Club and Arcade. What they consider defaults is circled, and what the manual says should be default is highlighted. So, it's 2 different things. One thing is highlighted, another thing is circled. Default difficulty we assume should be medium, and I think that's what our machine's on. But we think it's possible that Martin might have been playing on hard, but we don't know if they were actually set on hard or just looked at the settings and matched the dips to what they thought should be hard, which is actually medium. I don't know. As they say, I'll take it. It's a hard clear. At least for me, it was hard.
Yeah.
But
And Art of Fighting.
That was last night.
Lest we forget, Art of Fighting.
The Art of Fighting. Yeah, that was last night.
That's actually a pretty good game. Who made that one?
It's SNK, I thought.
It's
right?
SNK, yeah.
Yeah.
It's in one of the Neo Geos, right?
Yes.
And that's my favorite of those 3, I think.
Yeah. Well, 3 is just so different than all the rest of them.
Right.
Yeah.
And were there any other house highs that weren't world records?
Dig Dug 2, no. Martin Bedard also, he in the past has counterstopped that, so no one beat his score from the tournament.
Right.
For Dig Dug.
And a lot of Final Fight scores, obviously.
Yes.
Final fight for the
For Arcade Wars.
Arcade Wars with the one-up out in Brisbane, Australia. Very cool that everybody's putting in scores in that.
Yeah, I know that Brian Shillow has done 2.6 some million, 2668, which is on the same settings as Arcade 1-Up, so that'll be a nice entry. That'll hopefully help us out. And it's an average.
That's a clear, or
no? I don't think he cleared it. When he cleared it on the other settings, he had 3 million. So I don't think he cleared it on that score.
What's the difference between the settings that are being played for Arcade Wars and?
We went back and looked. There's 2 different difficulty settings. One I think is enemy AI. The other one is enemy health. And I think ours was 1 tick lower than default on the enemy health.
Oh,
so
okay.
we changed that. We bumped that up, and now we're the same.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, all great scores.
Yeah.
All fantastic.
What about you? What
What am I working on right now?
What are you working on right now?
There's always projects. One of the things I've been working on recently has been SPAT, or Tricycle San. And what's interesting about that game, of course, is there's a little bit of controversy with the scoring because there's this skill shot you can pull off on the very first level that gets you an exorbitant amount of points, but it's extremely difficult. And so, we were going back and forth on whether or not something like that was, good or bad, but I think it's actually a good thing to have the skill shot be part of the scoring because it's extraordinarily hard to pull off. And I will tell you one thing that I discovered about playing this game is trying to do the skill shot and trying to line things up in the way that you have to pull this thing off makes you a better player for the game, which is really interesting because a lot of these Easter egg tricks that happen in games are result of knowing where an item is or just some sort of knowledge.
Tech, yeah.
But this is actually sort of a training ground for what you're supposed to think about doing later in levels. So I found myself playing for the skill shot for a couple of hours, and I've never pulled it off, never even been close. There's two ways you can pull it off. You can get a 500,000 point skill shot, or you can get a 1,000,000 point skill shot. I've never done either one. I've lined them up all correctly and missed it or something. But I noticed myself later in levels, and I've gone pretty far in the game itself, playing that way now. And so it's improved me as a player, which I think is a totally different thing for an Easter egg for a game to do. And the game itself is fantastic, and I love playing the game just to play the game.
I don't think anyone said anything bad about that game.
No, and it's a beautiful game in a lot of respects. There's a lot to it. It's pretty deep. It's appealing to a lot of people. So I've really just been playing it to play it, and it's always great when you can find a game at the arcade when you're so focused on scoring, as you know, that you just like to play. That you don't really care about the scoring. You're just like sitting at the game, playing it to discover more things. For me, Spectre Files is like that. I just like to figure out the game more than just scoring, right? And I'm just curious about different things with it. It's not about the score. So that's one thing I've been playing. The other games I've been playing a lot of Lazarian, as Andrew and I've been going back and forth on that score quite a bit recently.
A lot, yeah.
And it's really an interesting game because there's a lot of different ways to score in that game that you wouldn't expect. There's a lot of ways you can score more points on levels, but you're putting yourself at greater risk for dying, obviously.
So the T20 scores, basically no one really knew what they were doing yet, or what would you say about
Well, and there is, obviously, as we've talked about, we believe Jason Cram has some techniques that I believe I heard through the grapevine that he didn't want to divulge those techniques because whatever techniques he had discovered just shot the score up to the stratosphere. Now, what's really interesting about that is that there's a time element in that game. So it seems as though any kind of milking that you can do is finite. There's a timer. It's kind of like Donkey Kong in that way. You just, at some point, you got to go forward. But there is quite a bit of points to be had in the early levels of that game, and the game kind of doesn't get that much harder. Some games. Congo Bongo is a good example of this.
Second loop, you're
just like, oh my gosh, this is way harder, and then it just keeps getting harder and harder. Like we discovered, Joel Snavely and I, and he set an amazing score on Congo Bongo over the summer that I don't know that it'll ever be broken at the GGA, but it's still getting harder at loop 12. And you think about who took the time to program this thing to go 2 hours into a game to get harder on loop 12. They're like, well,
most games are less than 5 minutes.
Right. And even back then, as we know, a lot of these games weren't set up to be played for more than a few minutes at a time because they just didn't have the foresight that anybody would ever want to play it for more than a few minutes at a time in some cases.
Sure.
But in Congo Bongo's case, they actually just kept making it harder. And we have never... we've been looking at this thing in virtual platforms. When we were working it up for Battle of the Arcades, we were playing it pretty much every day and working it up to see. But it wasn't just that it went on. It was that it kept getting harder, and there were nuances to each level that were different. And things got faster. There were more items that were coming at you, more enemies that were coming at you, different challenges. So, that's a little bit of what I've been playing. But there's so many games in the arcade that it's you just walk in and there's 10 to 20 things on your list, and you play 50 other things instead. So,
yeah.
How do you decide what to play? Like, is it like obviously Monday Mystery? Even if you're working on something,
right,
can sometimes throw a monkey wrench into whatever you're playing if it's depending on the title.
I have gone in recently and been open-minded. Like I used to have an agenda. I'm going to do this. 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 But I really recently have come in and said, you know what? I'm just going to see what I feel like doing once I get there, because once you take a walk around and sort of see what you're feeling like, a lot of it has to do with, okay, how much do I really want to concentrate on something today? Do I want to do 45 minutes of
Lazarian.
Lazarian or any other game I'm deep on, or do I want to play a game for fun? I've been playing a lot of regular Cubert recently.
Yeah.
Because I've really enjoyed just playing that game, just to kind of process my day.
And you
take
have
my
no
mind out.
aspirations of going for that house high that would take like 12 hours.
I think it's 12 hours.
Yeah, that's about what. Who has the high?
Is that one
Jeff
of the
King?
Jeff King scores?
I think it might be.
Yeah.
12 hours of Cubert. I mean, it's really, it doesn't seem like that much when you think about that Matt Mania score. It really doesn't. You know, because with Matt Mania, one misstep and he was going to be done. But with Cubert, at least you have a bunch of lives you can take a nap.
Sure,
right?
Take a little breather.
With the machine.
So for those just joining us, we had someone ask, "Who's this guy?"
Yeah, who is this guy?
This is our former Gamer of the Year, Matt Walters.
2013.
2013. That's
13,
correct.
yes.
Yes.
Who is been coming to the arcade for many, many years.
November 27th, 2011 was my first day at the arcade.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember it like it
What was the first game you played?
First game I played was Gyrus, because I had played Gyrus at Fun Zone over on 5th Avenue near Triton. That's my home arcade, and that's where when I was in high school, I went to high school with Seth Killian,
That's
and
awesome.
we went to Fun Zone together, the 5 of us that played arcade games, and that's where he first ever played Street Fighter 2.
Yeah.
And discovered that he was pretty good at
Pretty
the
good at
game.
Street Fighter
Well,
2.
but I mean, it had just come out. It was 1990. I mean, it was or 1991, whatever year it had just come out. I don't remember the year. Do you know the year?
I'm sure.
But it's 91.
Yeah.
Okay, so we were juniors in high school. We would go to Fun Zone because you couldn't go anywhere else back then. I mean, you just go to the arcade or you go to Denny's, right?
Yeah.
You know how it is. So the only game I played at Fun Zone was Gyrus. So when I walked into the arcade in November of 11, I played Gyrus, I played Castlevania, I played Frogger, and I played
Versus Castlevania.
Yeah, versus Castlevania. I'm sorry, and I played. There was one other game. Nibbler was the other game I played, which I'd never played before. I just like maze games. So those, definitely Gyrus was the first game I played.
Yeah.
Because it was like the experience, and I think a lot of people have this experience when you walk into Galloping Ghost for the first time. The first thing you go to is the thing you remember playing at the arcade all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
It's just-
Sure.
Was there a game that you first played at Galloping Ghost on August 13th at 11:59 p.m. 2010?
Well, I had been playing a few games
You've been
before
playing-
that, getting
Yeah.
everything ready.
But that's not the thing. I mean, was
The
there an official thing?
First day that we opened, I don't think I probably played anything that
What?
day. It
What?
was so the focus was just fix everything, talk to people,
Right.
make sure everything was running smoothly, and the build up was in getting there was just make sure everything's playing good for everybody else to enjoy it.
Right. Right. It's true. I mean, I'm sure that you were caught up in that. But what was the first day that you were at the arcade? Do you remember? 2012, 2013?
No, it might have been 2011 because I was coming from Mortal Kombat 11
Yeah.
or Mortal Kombat 9, which came out in 2011. I want to say. But I really wasn't playing stuff on the arcade floor, not that much. You might have ventured to the console cabinets. I really enjoyed playing MK9 on the console cabinet.
Yeah.
I just preferred the MK layout to much more than like a standard 6-button layout. So I'm like, oh, I gotta play out on the cabinet. So
That was an amazing thing, by the way. The
Yeah.
MK9. I mean, I'm not a fighting player, as you know, but what they did with Mortal Kombat 9 and then that cabinet, it's so cool.
It was definitely a lot of things lining up all at once, and I think that cabinet got a lot of exposure, and it what kind of helped formulate the team, and so many. It was so different.
you weeded out all the pad players and hitbox players too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it did. It's been such the whole place has evolved so much from when you guys first started coming in.
Yes, I'd say so.
What do you think has really. How do you see yourself? I know when you first started coming, you weren't into scoring,
Right.
and then versus Castlevania
Right.
was your first target.
Right.
And what kind of can you explain your evolution in gaming? Because
Yeah.
you just said something how you're coming in having fun at the arcade.
Yeah.
And I used to watch you guys come in grinding so hard on so many games.
Yeah.
And well, there was always the base, this is fun, where you're hanging out with your friends and everything and playing games. There had to have been times where it was just trying. And
Oh yeah.
explain your evolution.
Okay, so I first started coming to the arcade in 2011, and I'll tell you why I showed up at Galloping Ghost, because this is kind of a funny story. I never watched The King of Kong until 2010. Okay, I'd never seen the movie. A bunch of my friends had told me to watch this film because they thought it was an interesting documentary, and they knew I liked documentaries. Now, to give you a background, and our listeners a background of my gaming history, I had a Nintendo console when I was 13 years old. I had an Atari console when I was 5. I had a PlayStation console when I was in my early 20s. I played them, and I played the games I liked, but casually. And I didn't play them really for score, or so I didn't think. I mean, I was playing some of them more than others, but I never thought about if I was better than other players because I played them by myself. I didn't really... And I played in some arcades as a kid, but not many. I went to Fun Zone, went to Dennis's place for games, mostly as a place to hang out and blow off steam. I never thought that I was necessarily any good at this stuff. So, I saw The King of Kong, and I was like, wow, this is really fascinating. These people are really interesting. This whole setup was really engaging and intriguing. I want to go out and find an arcade. And what's interesting was that I didn't find Galloping Ghost first. I found Star Wars first out in DeKalb. And I went out there, and I was like, wow, that's a long way to drive. Because it is. I live in Oak Park. So I drove out to DeKalb a couple times, played at Star Wars. Really great place, by the way. You know, historical place, a lot of classic games. Really had a great time with those guys. And then my friend Jeff Greenberg was like, hey, you know, there's a place in Brookfield. You should check it out. And I found out about Galloping Ghost Arcade. And went over here that day and was like sensory overload. Was you know, kind of just in awe of what was existing 20 minutes from my house. So after taking it all in, and what was interesting about it was when I first took the Castlevania score, I didn't even think that I was playing that well. I just was doing what I'd done at home on my Nintendo console.
So you didn't do the point pressing the first time through?
Well, I didn't, because the score at that time at the arcade also didn't represent point pressing, and our discovery was we discovered the Twin Galaxy score. We discovered the things later.
With the red skeletons and all that?
Yeah, and then the 5 lives only. And so I got the score later that represented the world record a couple months later. But my evolution as a gamer, to get back to the original question, is, you know, I came in and I played a few games, and I played them because I was familiar with them. You know, I didn't play that many games I was unfamiliar with. And then, at some point, about a year into my gaming, I started playing shmups a lot. The first real shmup I played was Ikaruga, and I played this game every night, and it was down for a couple of months because it's such a hard game to keep working because of the nature of the hardware.
Naomi.
Yeah, it's like a CD in there. It's like I think it was made for Dreamcast. Is that accurate?
It did come out on Dreamcast.
So I played that game obsessively, and I understood different mechanics of scoring, and I started to unlock these other things. And then I entered like a really competitive phase where I played games competitively, and I was really grinding to win Gamer of the Year in 2013, and I was going out to FunSpot and playing in tournaments. And I really, really did that. And then I took a break for a little while after, because, you know, when you do that much competing, you just, it's a lot. So took a break for about a year, did a lot of music stuff and other things. And when I came back to the arcade, after my initial, like, I'm going to start scoring again and doing all those other things, I really settled into really appreciating the arcade for what it is and the experience of being at the arcade and having things happen that you don't expect and becoming familiar with games that you really never expected to engage with. And there is no better moment, and I was thinking about this on the way over here, it's not about high scores. It's about reaching a level where you're mastering a game. It's almost like the process, when you get to that final part of the process, and you know you're going to get the score, because you know you've hit that level of play. That's the beautiful moment you want to put in that bottle, right there. Yeah. That's the moment. And so, but a lot of those moments have come from unpredictable places, and I kind of realized that my experience at the arcade was much more about engaging with people, talking with my friends, gaming, scoring, all those things, but really being open to new experiences too. And so it really has evolved to a place where it includes a lot of different aspects, whereas when I first came into the arcade, it was, I'm just doing this casually, I'm just doing this to compete, I'm just doing this to score. And now I'm like, it's just great to be here. It's just great to be in this place, in this moment, and experience this culture at this time, and I'm thankful every day I can come to the arcade. And, you know, a lot of that comes from the camaraderie.
Yeah.
You know, because we all didn't know each other originally. You know, I met Matt Rocco, the first gamer of the year. First year I was at the arcade, but he was coming in at different times, and I didn't meet him until about 6 months. I met James 6 months in, and it was, you know, the three of us were really competing a lot in the early days, and Fred was coming in too. I met Fred about a year into, but it was really 2015, 2016 when Jamie Tibbetts started coming more regularly. Fred and I became really good friends, and this group of people sort of expanded out and included so many people. And now it's like this really organic, great thing where we have this great group of people, and it's more than just gaming. It's just celebrating life with each other, celebrating this hobby, and getting involved in the culture. So
That was always such a, like, there was always the concern of, there's been cliques and various other video gaming communities,
Right.
and that was always kind of one of the things that has always been so impressive about this community, that it is so inclusive and brings new people in. And there's always been, as new people come in, there's that kind of, you're at different places.
Like experience-wise? Or
No,
what?
not only experience-wise, but I look at Brian Keita
Uh-huh.
when he came in, and George Gaynor and Nick Young, all those guys came in. And it was so, there's people looking in at how this community is like, it's very inviting, but sometimes people come in and they just kind of tilt things a little bit. And not in a bad way.
Right.
But just in a way that kind of stirs things up. And Brian came in, and you and him went in Metal Black.
Yeah,
That was a great score battle.
Yeah,
It really was.
That was
It
an
was.
awesome
Because
score battle.
you had to 1cc the game before you even could get to the score, right?
The score of Metal Black represents 14,000 points short of what I believe is a max out without autofire. So
Okay.
I think the 547,000 that I got that day that you were sitting next to me, actually, I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was 2013. It was May. I think it was May, or it was sometime in 2013. But I remember that day very vividly, and that was a great score. And Brian and I, you know, became friends. He went out to Fun Spot with us the next year, and you know, we were rivals. You know, we would go back and forth, and we would really we would challenge each other on games, and it was always, you know, kind of like competitive. And there are different edges and angles to this, but one of the benefits that this community really has, and I think you'd agree with this as well, as somebody who sees this all the time, is we've kind of seen the drama unfold in other communities, and we've kind of made a conscious decision that we'd like to move in a different direction with our community. And I think that's been sort of an unconscious choice in some respects, but it's also been a conscious choice. And so we've really tried to include everybody in the community that we can, regardless of their background and regardless of like what you said, where they're coming from in this whole thing. And we want Galloping Ghost to be a place where everybody is involved, no matter where they're coming from, right?
You know what? You maybe, you and Doc were just saying, reminded me. So Andrew, like, basically came out of nowhere.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And has been doing some great scores. Like I've done my best to try to welcome him into the community. You know, we've brought him out to Tony's, you know, quite a few times now, and he's a really nice guy, and you know, he's pushing people to up their scores, and shaking things up. Like, and that would have never happened if he didn't come in. You know.
And to speak to the community aspect again, Andrew was very kind of, I would say, reticent and reluctant to sort of involve himself in the community
Yes.
in a social way
And that's
until
fine.
until he kind of
Yeah.
sussed out, you know. And some people are like this too. Like I know that other people I've met are like this as well. Like some people from Fun Spot that we've gotten to know are like, oh, let's just see where you're coming from before we go out to dinner with you, because there's so many different colorful characters in this community. You may not want to have dinner with all of them. Andrew, he kind of approached it gently, but we kind of kept hammering on and trying to include him on things because there was so much respect for him as a gamer and so much admiration for him. The things he did in 6 months were, more things than most gamers do in 2-3 years.
Yeah.
So I just was amazed. And really, it's interesting. We want to get to know people and how they tick.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an interesting thing about the differences between us and gamers. We're different people. We have different ticks. We have different ways of scoring.
You actually also reminded me. There's one thing I wanted to bring up, and me and Doc were talking before you got here. Like, we want to talk about player burnout.
Yes.
And I think people don't talk about it, but it's totally a real thing. And I think, have you ever hit the point where you're just like, I gotta step away. I can't play for a while. I need to do something else.
The last. So after I won Gamer of the Year in 2013, I played pretty hard through, I would say, 2014's. This is all before the first T20, because the first T20 was in 2015. So I played pretty hard through when Fred won the next year. And I played up until about October. And I remember that year pretty distinctly for gaming. So in late 13, Mission Craft hit the floor, and I was grinding that like crazy. And mid 2014, a couple other favorites. I think you got to Don Apache because that was the game that I asked you to get. You got that really cold winter of 14, the polar vortex, the first polar vortex. We're sitting back there playing with our coats on. Remember that? And you got Raiden Fighters and Raiden Fighters 2.
Oh yeah, I remember when that was by the back door.
Yeah, they were all by the back door, and the back door was so cold. It was so cold that winter.
I forgot about that.
And I was still grinding, and then the last game that you got that I was really grinding on was Cyvern, or Sivern, or whatever you want to say.
Dragon Schmuck.
Yeah, the Dragon, and it's a beautiful game, by the way. And I won CC'd, and I had a great score that represented doing whatever the chaining mechanism was. I can't even remember what the chaining.
There was the little medals on the ground.
Yeah, it was this metal thing, and I did that, and I just realized, man, I am fried. I took a break, and I was really involved with music at that time. I was really promoting a lot of my own bands and doing things like that. But I'll tell you, and I took the better part of 2.5 years off. I still participated in T20, and I came to the arcade once a month or so. But I probably took 2.5 years off between late 14 and early 17, when Boda happened in 17 again. Mm-hmm. And that's what really re-energized me. But if I hadn't taken that time off, and that has happened to other gamers too, and it typically it goes along with winning the award.
Yeah.
There's a break that has to happen after that.
Yeah.
About a year after you win the award, you kind of hit this wall.
I don't know if it's a wall, but it's just like you can't, like, other things in your life just fall by the wayside if you focus too much on the games. At least for me it did. And I don't know if I've burned out, but I definitely have. I'm not rushing to reclaim scores right away. Someone beats the score, and I'm not. Oh crap! I gotta go grind this right now.
I think so much of that has an impact. I think it's actually much bigger than people think. In the fact, I've got a 7-8 year theory of how the industry works and how things cycle every 7 or 8 years. Whether it's the main focus of genre of game, the players, and it really seems to work like that for a lot of instances. And the burnout factor of players, it's been fairly, not that people get out of it, but that break that they take really influences so many things.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you came back, the arcade had already changed so much.
You came back super refreshed too. Like immediately, you were
Oh my
like
God.
on night driver, pole
Oh,
position.
yeah.
Like you were on fire for a while.
Well, and what was funny was it corresponded with, really rededicating myself to the things I loved. I was like, I've just been sort of in a malaise right now, and I need something. And I remember I came back to the arcade, and Boda was going to be happening. I want to say it was like March of that year or April, sometime around the spring, like it usually is. And I think the first score I got was Nibbler back. I think that was the first score I got back, and I started marathoning it, and then I got Night Driver shortly after.
Yeah,
It
that's
was in
right.
June, but the Boda was in March, and I'd worked some games up for Boda, and I'd seen my flashes again. I was like, "There's something in here. I can get this back, and I need this right now." And gaming is such an important part of my life. I mean, in terms of how I approach things and everything else. It is such a great hobby, and it affords me so many opportunities to feel good about myself, but also be involved in a community, but also process some things you got to process. Like if you had a hard day and you come to the arcade and you can just play some games, sometimes that can really help.
Yeah.
And
as long as you're not frustrated trying to get a score.
And exactly, but
Yeah.
I hit the ground running. He's right. Like I think I got 9 scores in like 2
2 months,
months
yeah.
or something, and
It was crazy.
I hit like 7 or 8 of them in 1 week, where I was like, Galaga 3 and
Pole position.
the end, and
No.
pole position,
No, later.
all those, but all those fell at the same time, and it was really an amazing thing to be a part of again, and they do go in cycles. They really do.
Do you think that the period where you're not as active, do you think there's a way that players can avoid that? And do you think that it's the over focus on the competitive side that drives you to that point where it's just so mentally taxing?
Yeah. I think there is, and I would say this. I would say certain gamers have a really good balance of, okay, I'm going to play this game for fun and this game for score. But once you hit the higher level of gaming on multiple titles, and you know that you can compete on a bunch of them, I think I have 25 or so house highs at Galloping Ghost, and I think I have like 25 or 30 second place scores that I have never gone back to and taken back or never put the time in. And they're hard scores because when I took the score, I was already at a high level. Somebody else got a better score. Good example, Strikers, 1945 plus.
Was that Tibbetts?
That's Tibbetts, and he put that score where I knew it would take me a lot to get it. But if you come in and you play only the things that require that level of concentration all the time, and you're sitting there trying to get that score 100% of the time that you're at the arcade, you're going to be miserable after a while. I mean, you just are.
Yeah.
So what I tell people is, be sure to come in and have one game that you have on the floor that you know you're not going to take seriously, you're going to play for fun, and you're just going to play it to play it. And you're going to hang out with your friends. Because I think that there is a mental process that you go through when you competitively game. And that is that you grind your mind down in some ways, either by concentrating or by being like, oh, I'm not getting this, or the other things that we do when we're going through the process of trying to do something really hard. And if you're just doing that all the time, your brain is going to just be like,
It hurts.
Right.
So one of the things I really appreciated was the times in which I could just come in. One of the things I've been really enjoying recently is coming in and watching other people play.
Yes.
And I think watching other people play at a high level or trying to cheer them on to get a score. I'll give you an example. Jeff Lucas got the Golly Go score a couple weeks ago.
That was awesome.
And,
Once he seeded.
and I spent a lot of that night watching him try to get the skill shot on Spatter and trying to get the score on Golly Ghost. And it was just so much fun to hang out with a friend and watch him try to get something when I knew he was probably going to get it. Because he was so close, and it represented a level beyond where I could ever do with Golly Ghost, at least. I mean, that is an exceptional score in that game. and it's a fun game, and it's fun to watch.
It is.
Yeah.
The cabinet's so
Um,
interesting that it's a quick play.
And I got to tell you too, there's certain games at that arcade that, Gun Frontier is an example of a game I just recently got the score on, where it's so hard to hit that button, because it's not auto
It's just
fire.
rapid.
And so
forever.
you come in there and you try to get that score. Another thing is Piranha, right? So Stephen Lucas and I have gone back and forth on
Like
Piranha
5 times?
5 times. We both know now that we have to wear a glove on our hand, because the way the joystick is, and the fact that you're just like jerking it back and forth trying to get things grouped the right way. We actually compared blisters one night, and we had the same blister at the same place and the same finger
From the joystick? Yeah.
trying to do this thing back. So now I wear as a glove I have. There's a Piranha glove. But I'll tell you, if you come in and do things like that to yourself, physically, mentally, otherwise, you're going to really wear yourself down. So what I tell people is, it's more about having a wide range of experience at the arcade. A lot of fighting game players, the way they blow off steam and don't take things too seriously is fighting with each other. The fighting games,
Well, that brings up. Do you like competing against? Like, there's the people you don't know. There's the and your
local
friends.
Yeah.
And which do you like competing against more? Is it like, are your friends harder to compete against?
Mhm.
And with that, does it take, like, if you're taking somebody's score?
Right.
Like, does that ever factor in? Like, there's so many different elements and parts to this question that I.
Oh, I understand what you're asking. Does my personal relationship impact how I approach getting a score, or how does my relationship
Part of
impact?
it. Part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the relationship aspect is interesting because, if a gamer is going through a rougher time where he's lost a lot of scores recently, you might be like, I'm not going to take that back right now, right? Like, that's one thing if it's a friend of yours, right? Because you're like,
So I've seen like, oh, this guy's having a bad time.
Yeah.
What's one more?
Right.
He won't miss that.
He won't miss
Or
that.
man, he didn't like losing that last one. He's certainly not gonna.
Well,
I'll give him the business a little bit by taking one more.
And certainly, I would say the closer friends I have at the arcade, I like to, like, one night recently when I took Gun Frontier and Major Havoc, both tracks from Jamie Tibbetts, the same week, I was just rubbing it into him. I was like, okay, but Jamie's an established arcade gamer, one of the best scorers in the arcade, and I knew he was going to get those scores back eventually. So it was one of those things where I was just needling him, to push him along, because we do that with each other. My good friends at the arcade.
If you have that relationship.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, it's so funny because we don't have the camaraderie aspect is interesting, but when I don't know a player as well, but he's a friend of mine, it's always a feeling out process to see, okay,
how are they going to react?
What's going to happen with this? And so one of the more interesting ones recently was the Congo Bongo thing with Joel Snavely. Like, I was just getting to know him at the time. We were going back and forth in the score. And we became friends, and it was great because we both respected each other, and we were like hoping the other person would do well and hoping the other person would beat the score because it was a good. It seemed equanimous. It seemed like it was an equitable thing. We really wanted that relationship, and you can kind of feel that out. So it does have an impact, the personal relationship you have, or whether or not you know somebody. When it's a stranger, I'm most likely not going to care. I'm going to just take the score and see what happens. Or if it's somebody who's really had a lot of success recently, like Mr. Andrew, then I'm going to try to take that score because I know he needs, yeah, like he said, iron sharpens iron.
That's Vern Veek. He's the versus Excite Bike world record holder.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
he's quoting Little King of Kong there, like
Yeah.
the Steve Sanders quote.
Yeah.
Iron sharpens iron, as the Bible says, I believe he says.
The personal relationship definitely enters into my mind, and not that I want it to, it just does, like, subconsciously. Like, recently, Gun Force, which was a Tibbet score as well. I'm like, I didn't feel like taking a Tibbet score, but I wanted to play the game.
Right.
So, and I didn't do, like, a massive amount of point pressing, but I ended up beating his score, and I don't know if he's going to go back to it or not. We'll see. But that did enter my head. I'm like, I don't want to take another Tibbet score. Walter's just took two of his.
Right. Well, and the interesting thing is, Pete and I have almost no overlap in the games that we play.
Almost none.
And it's funny because you should be playing Metal Block, you know it.
Maybe when that room cools down. I
but it just happens to be that Pete and I don't have a lot of overlap in scores we pursue. I can't think of a game that you and I've competed on. Can
No,
you?
not really.
I mean, I guess that if I was playing the Gradius.
Oh, our
games,
type. We weren't competing head to head.
That's no, we did because I had the score and you took it from me.
Yes.
So
that was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago, and maybe at some point I'll try to play that again. Because I've gotten better at R-Type recently, through playing in other tournaments with other people. There's been some really interesting developments online where there are now more modular MAME tournaments that happen where you can, it's a lot more of a community that I want to be involved with because you play 12 games for a month, and I use that as a way to get to know games I've never known before, which is really interesting because there's some titles now, and this has never happened before, but there's at least one or two titles now. If they hit the arcade floor, I'm going to have an advantage.
Yeah.
Because that's never happened before. And like Mr. Drew's Wild Ride, we just played a lot of that. And that's not on the arcade floor. But if that ever goes on the arcade floor, I'm probably going to take that score.
Well, and that
You didn't play it at Haunted Trails?
I didn't play it at Haunted Trails or Chuck E. Cheese.
Okay.
Or Showbiz Pizza.
All right.
Like, how long does your game knowledge stay with you? Because
that's a good
looking
question.
at T20,
Yeah.
like Martin Bedard has a max out score on Dig Dug 2.
Yeah.
And he walked up to it and he's like, oh, I don't know what to even do with this.
Right.
And
right. That's so funny.
How long? What's your game memory like?
Okay, so my game memory is good. Now it's funny because I talk with Jamie about this a lot, and Jamie forgets everything. He claims he forgets everything pretty much immediately, and he's got to work it all back up again. I tend to retain the knowledge, but my mind is so disassociative and random that whenever I walk up to a game for the first time, whether I know it or I don't, I'm just going to play terribly for the first 4 plays I play it, and then I'm going to be able to start focusing on everything.
Yeah.
So a good example of a game that I left and then went back to was Pole Position. So I got that score at 65-8. I want to say it was a year and a half ago or something like that. It was like the middle of 18, something like that.
Was that before Gores had it?
No, Gores had 65-610, and Gores took it after playing it in the Boda on 17. So
right after Boda was
done. After Boda was done, he saw, that you have those moments where you sort of see how to get a score, and you're like, wait a second, I can do this. And I you saw it because on Sunday after Boda even ended, I think Gores was sitting there by himself playing pole position, trying to get that score, and he finally ultimately got 65-600, and I went back to it, and I had a 64 score or whatever, and just for the enjoyment of the game, started playing it again, and worked it up, and grinded like crazy, and got 65-810, beat a score. And then I put it down for, I guess it was 8 months, or 7 months, whatever it was before we started working up the games for the Boda, for January. And I came back to it, and the first play that I played, I got a 64 or something, which was a really good score for not having played it. So what I guess I would say is the more that you've played the game at a high level, the more reps you have at it, the more likely you are to walk back up to it 6 to 8 months later and just be able to be like, okay, there it is. That's my experience at least. If I've worked that game up to a medium level, I might be starting over. Or if the game has more complicated mechanics, I could not walk up to Dioja right now and do anything.
Yeah.
Even though I set that score and it represents a max out chain of 2 levels, there is no way I remember that chain. There is no way I could do that. So if the score is dependent upon some crazy mechanics, Ikaruga, I can't chain like that right now because I don't remember everything.
Have you ever used that as a strategy to take a score where you're intentionally staying sharp but not taking the score, letting somebody else forget their tech?
Yep. I actually have used that technique before because I actually waited on Gunfront. This is funny. I will admit this to Jamie right now. I waited on I waited on Gun Frontier until I was like, okay, I think he's probably rusty enough where if I take this back, he's not going to want to come back. And take that. Especially because it's a physically demanding game to play. He's probably going to let this one go for a little while. And so I sort of waited that out because I enjoyed playing the game, and I kind of was doing some ancient research and doing some other things and trying to find out the secrets, and I was like, oh, okay, I see how this can be gotten. But then I was like, no, I'm going to wait on this. I'm just going to wait a little while longer. I've definitely employed that tech. Yeah, exactly. I've definitely.
He said strikers will be his forever.
I saw that. Well, I mean, it's funny because he's not. It's a really good score, but neither one of us have ever won CC. That there's so many unfinished projects that all of us have at this arcade.
Kittyland scores?
Nah, yeah, they are Kittyland scores. So the strikers won CC on those hard settings with 2 lives only.
Oh.
Would be some massive project. The Diojo White Label 1cc is some huge massive project that would require so much time that it's almost worth doing. The Don Pachi 2-all, which I got really close to, would be, something that I'd have to work back up again in 45 minutes a pop.
What has been kind of that cutoff where it's like you've got your goals.
Mm-hmm.
What's the number one thing that takes you off point of achieving? Like you work so hard to get so close, and then
Yeah.
And we all have goals,
right?
That it's like, oh yeah, I want to take this score back, or I want to, like, what is it?
Okay, so the Don Pachi story is interesting because it's the only game that Jamie, Fred, and I all played continuously for 6 months together.
Yeah.
We played that game for 6 straight months, and playing that game for 6 straight months really put us in a position. And I just watched a video of us playing this game in the middle of all that. Like, I want to say it was 3 months into this whole massive undertaking, where I was watching this and mesmerized by how good we were. I was like, this is really good gameplay. Like, this is...
Someone posted it on Facebook recently. Was that you or
It was
Fred?
a memory. It was a memory that either Fred or Jamie posted. And I was like watching this, and I'm like, how did I do that? Like, that doesn't... So, in the case of the Don Pachi score, I'd gotten this 24 million score. Now, to give you some context for this, we were all in the low 20s, 21, 23, 24, and this score represented, doing everything on the first loop completely perfectly, and then getting this much further on the second loop, deep in the second loop, or doing this much more correctly in chaining while there's bullets everywhere, right? So I was actually just waiting for Jamie or Fred to push that next thing. And this was around the time of the 2016 T20, which was in October. It was the only time it was in October, right? It was October of that year. It was the one that we did, the first one we did here. Mm-hmm. And that weekend was the weekend I set that Don Pachi score. And you guys were sitting next to me when I set that score, I believe.
Yeah, so I was sitting on Darius first when you were playing.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was simply waiting for someone to take it back, and then it just sort of ended at that point because what happens with T20, and I'll tell you, this is one of the number one things that'll take you off of a scoring thing, is a tournament. So we're all working on our own games. T20 happens every year and completely derails all of us. It really does. Like, every project going into T20, you can just put that one on the shelf for the rest of your life. You know why? Because you're going to play 20 new games, your whole mind is going to reset, and then you're going to start playing games that are coming on the floor the next
They're going to
week.
have a bunch of new favorites from this tournament, and yeah.
And Monday Mystery, a game, I'll give you an example of 2 games that were like, oh my God, thank you so much. Aspaluda and Death Smiles went on the floor the same week, and that was the Shmups week of 2017 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So those 2 things hit the floor, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to put all this stuff away, and here we go. I'm going to play Death Smiles, and it was so much fun playing those games in an arcade for the first time, because Aspaluda is an amazing little mechanic. It's totally different than the other Shmups. It's a cave game. I'm hugely into cave games.
Joe was asking about the
the
Japanese scores.
There is on YouTube, and this was just released on the 20th anniversary of Don Pachi, that release. And just to give you a little bit of background on Don Pachi is the first cave shmup, and it was released in 1995. And Don Pachi in Japanese means it's the onomatopoeic sound of gunfire. So it's like ba-boom, or kabang, or whatever. That's what Don Pachi means.
Oh, is that why he says do 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 don pachi?
Well, do don pachi is differently.
Yeah.
So Don Pachi means gunfire, ba-boom, or kabang, but Don Pachi also means bee leader, like honeybee, bee leader. So it's a funny thing. It sounds like gunfire, and there's a bee in the game. There's a bunch of bees everywhere, and there's a bee leader, right? So Donpachi means angry bee leader. Okay, so on the 20th anniversary of Donpachi, there's a cult in Japan. This is endlessly fascinating to me. There's a cult in Japan that they have a secret society. They have like admission you have to earn, and they're the only ones who knew how to get anything above, I'm going to say, 50 million in Donpachi. And this represented knowing chains that nobody else knew in certain levels where it wasn't really determined.
Are they all using the A ship too?
They have to be, because the C ship, most players can get in the 30s if they 2-all and they do most of the things correctly. Mm-hmm. But on the 20th anniversary, this guy posted a max out of the A ship. And I mean 99 million points, and maxing it out just at the very end of the game. And the thing that this guy did on the second loop, level 5 opening chain, the opening chain, and then on the second loop, level 5 midship chain, is nothing short of absolutely astounding play. Like, we're talking movements that seem robotic, and there was questions about whether or not this guy
was it tool assisted or something? Or was
it was not tool assisted, because this guy is well known, and this guy was vetted, and he certainly did this. And it was amazing to see that, because
so that is the world record.
That is a world record, but the games on the world records on all these games are known, and they are so high that they represent the top level of play possible in a lot of cases. Theoretically perfect games. White label Donpachi Daiojo is an interesting case, because Cave went back and reissued the game as black label, as we all know.
Right.
Because they felt as though the game was programmed to be so difficult that it would be
unfair.
It would be unfair to try to get people, because they really ramped it up with this one. They were like, well, we're going to see how far you guys can be pushed. So when they released Black Label, it was a much more doable game. Now, there still are people who play White Label at that level where you're like, you want to watch something on Twitch or YouTube that represents the best level of play I've ever seen anywhere. That's it, So I would say theoretical max outs on all those games. I know the Donpachi world record is in the 700 or 800 millions. The B-Storm record is in the billions somewhere. And it's like 3 billion for the B-Storm.
But these are like really, people know these scores.
I would say
they're published and everything.
Yeah, people know these scores. They're widely vetted in Japan, and I think regardless of platform, they're also But yeah, certainly the number one thing that takes all of us off of our scoring is T20 every year. It's so funny. It's like clockwork. Like just anything that you've got going on. Because the reason why Jamie and Fred didn't take the Donpachi score back, and I kind of knew this, was Jamie was really focusing on finishing in third in the 2016 T20, which he did, I believe. That was the first time he finished in third. And Fred was really grinding that tournament as well. And I knew that if I came in, played the tournament, qualified, yes, finished in like 10th or 12th or whatever, but then went over to the arcade and was at a high level on Donpachi and just kept working and maybe got that score where I needed to get it, that they were going to be in a place where maybe they weren't going to be coming back to get that score right away. And it stood for 3 years, so we'll see if it
your
stands.
Theory is good.
Well, that kind of answers a couple questions you had earlier.
Do you feel that you are still improving as a gamer as far as accuracy and things along that nature? Are you still getting better?
Oh, absolutely. I am a much better gamer now than I even was 6 months ago. And part of it also is trying to stay within my own known set of, there's two aspects to it. There's the psychological aspect to it, which is you've got to say, okay, wait a second. You don't need to get down on yourself. You need to keep grinding at this. You need to keep working at this until you can get this. And the physical aspect of it, the better part for me is I'm more intuitive about the mechanics of the game than I used to be. So I'll be looking for ways to improve my gameplay, not just advancing. I'll be looking for Easter eggs. I'll be looking for ways in which I can better use ships or use shots, or there was a really interesting a game that we were playing recently, Ultra X Weapons, where I took that score after switching ships, but I was very much like, well, I wonder if doing this with this button is going to be any better than doing this, or I wondered if using bombs in a different way would do something. And those are the questions I think that come with experience. And I truly believe that so much of your ability as a gamer is about your attitude, but it's also about a level of experience and a level of comfort and a determination. So I feel as though there's certain players I know who've been doing this for a really long time who are still improving after 10 or 15 years of playing. And that's really amazing to see. You know, I had the opportunity to go out, and I went to New York a couple of weeks ago. I want to say it was middle of August, actually. And I got a chance to hang out with Steve Wagner, and it was amazing. And Tim Ettinger, it was amazing because watching those guys play, and those guys have been around for a while. They've been around since 2007, 8, 9. That
They did all the Fun Spot tournaments.
they did all the Fun Spot tournaments. Those guys are exceptional players, but watching them approach some of the games that they're really deep in on, it's like watching people at a different level. And that's really cool to see, because when you are able to do it for a number of years, you don't even realize the ways in which you get better.
Yeah.
You know.
With the games do you like to approach a game completely fresh, just step up to it, learn your own stuff, or do you like researching beforehand?
I have a rule about this now, because I've spoiled myself in the past, where I've looked everything up and I've walked up to the game and done the thing, and I've been like, why did I do this? Like it makes it less fun in some ways to know everything in advance, and just to walk up to a game and hit a couple buttons. Something about entering the codes for Major Havoc feels dirty to me.
The warp codes?
The warp codes.
Yeah.
So you start on level 25 or whatever it is, and you start with 1,000,000 points if you
Yeah.
pass one screen. So there was a game, and it's really interesting because the players are so good at such a high level now that oftentimes we'll walk out of Monday Mystery and the game will be at such a high level that the next day it's broken. Because somebody's figured something out where they can do something perpetually. We have to devise new rules or whatever, and it's just it really happens like that. So my new rule is that I'll play the game for a night, and I won't look. I'll just play. And then when I hit my wall, whatever that wall is that you hit, where you're like, okay, I don't really know what to do to get beyond this point, then I'll maybe do a little bit of research. So a good example of that is Outzone, which was an Arcade Wars game recently. Didn't know anything about the game, didn't do the Monday Mystery. It got announced for Arcade Wars, and I decided just to play it. Just to play it. And so I walked up to it on a Saturday afternoon. The arcade was jammed. Saturday afternoons are the peak time for the arcade, and there was kids everywhere, and there was people everywhere. And it was in a good spot, so I could have a little bit of room. But when I walked up to it, played it, got to level 3 or 4, and really enjoyed just learning the game organically, and really enjoyed just playing the game. But I hit the wall eventually. I hit a boss where I was like, I don't know how to get past this guy right now. This is going to be something I'm going to sit there and spend 20 minutes to get to the same point and not figure it out because it's happening too fast. Why don't I take a look at what's happening from another perspective? Now, I could have watched another gamer play. I could have watched Brian Schiller play it. He's an excellent player at that game. So watch Jamie play. He's great at that game too. I believe that was the game that Jamie actually requested.
Yep.
For his
Gamer of the Year request.
His Gamer of the Year request. So so he requested that game, and that game was one where I enjoyed working it up, but at some point I needed to go and be like, okay, what am I doing wrong here? Because I wasn't going to spend 20 minutes to get to the same point over and over and over again, just to get beat by the same boss in the same way, because I didn't really know how to unpack it. You know what I mean?
With it, when you played at like for everybody that played at arcades,
Mhm.
like how different is it for that element alone, where that's what everybody had to do back in the day,
Right.
and now it's changed so much.
I have a
Like,
theory about that.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah?
Well, back in the day, there would be a line of 10 people waiting to play, and you'd see what they were doing. And
Sure.
now we all come to the arcade, except for Mondays. We're all playing at different times, and we're
Mm-hmm.
not getting the feedback. Like, if Jamie saw, or if Shiloh saw you playing on that Saturday, he could be like, this is what got you on that boss.
Right.
And that would be your feedback right there instead of having to go to a video. You could have possibly done something on your next run without referring to outside source.
Right. Well, what's interesting though is, okay, let's go back to the Wayback Machine for a second, because let's talk about pole position, because something remarkable happened this week. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about this.
So Daniel Yemnitz, who's been working on this game at home for, I think it's been at home largely. He's got a sit-down cabinet at his house, and he's been filming himself for the last, I don't know, year or so, or even longer.
Maybe.
He set a 67,000 pole position score for the first time in what we believe to be
Like 35
35 years
Mhm.
since '84, since July 1st of '84. Now, originally when Les Legier and the other guy Mike were going back and forth in this game, he posted this too. It took them a year to move 300 points in that game, but they watched everything that each other did, and it's not dissimilar to watching things on YouTube or whatever now.
Or main replays, yeah.
But that game is at such a level that unless you have a perfect run, and I mean a perfect run, like you don't hit the side rail ever, you don't hit a puddle ever, you don't make a single mistake with anything, you cannot get that score. You just cannot, right? You can't even get close to it. So I think in the long run for all these games, that eventually works itself out because everybody is striving for better. So if you're improving to where we get a score where we're getting to level 3 on a game, well, that's great. But it's not, if you're looking up stuff to get to level 3, that's not really that high of a score. I think the ends justify the means because when we get to these scores, these 730, how many?
For what?
Arcade has 731 games now?
33. How dare you?
Oh my God, 733. Well, 733 games are eventually going to be at a level that are going to be so high that it's not going to matter if you look stuff up, you got to execute.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So I think that kind of stuff works itself out. The lower a game's high score is, the more looking stuff up and utilizing techniques like MAME or safe stating to help yourself might matter. But if that score is legit been sharpened like the iron, you're going to have to just execute something at an extraordinarily high level.
Do you think getting those early high scores
Mhm.
is what brings like newcomers in? Like
Yep.
it's so hard. Do you think at some point there will be less high score players as the scores are already so high? The
But-
point of entry gets so you look at where the scores were back early on the
Uh-huh.
first year or two of the arcade.
Uh-huh.
And now every score just has such a ridiculous number tied to it.
It does, but I think one of the things that's great about the way that we score things at Galloping Ghost is that because the cards have 3 or maybe they'll have 5 someday names on them, you know, the number I'm prouder of number 2 scores at this arcade than I am of some of my records.
Yeah.
Like there's certain number 2 scores where I'm like, that score is a great score, and I don't know if I'd ever be able to do that again. And I'm really proud. I remember the day I did that. Depth charge is a good example of that. I think I got 4,000 points in depth charge, and Jamie beat it. He got 4,100 points, and that's great. Like I think it's a fantastic score. I don't know that I'll be able to take it back again, but I think that there's so many games that are added every year that are different scoring levels throughout that I think that there's a nice balance right now. Yes, you're not going to be able to walk up to a game like, Bubbles and beat James White's score like right out of the gate because his world record score is huge. You're not going to be able to walk up and take one of Rocco's scores right away because, this Rocco scores are ridiculously resilient. I mean, he hasn't been playing at a high competitive level for a few years because he's no longer as close as he should be. But he I'm kidding, Rocco. And but
Like his elevator action score.
but his scores are still there.
Yeah.
But I think that the results speak for themselves, because this year alone, I think we've added so many people to the competitive scoring community. And I think this has been the year that we've added more people to that community than almost any other year. Usually we get one or two every year that are like serious gamers who come back. You know, Chris Plackey a couple of years ago was the new kid in town, and he was like,
Last year was Alex.
Yeah, Danny and other people have kind of, and Andrew, but this year Andrew's come around, and then we've had, Joel Snavely's come around more often, and we've got so many people just submitting to Orcade. I mean, Joel Jurnovich has been around for a long time, but he's a constant presence, and Joe will come in and set scores on many different titles all the time. You've got John Ocampo coming more regularly. You've got so many people, and I think people submit the scores in many cases, whether they're competing or not. I'm seeing more random scores on Arcade.
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool too, because I think people are like, wow, I have the highest score for today on this game. Like, hey, I've got the highest score for Galaga. And you know what? That used to be enough. Like, if you came into an arcade and you were going to be the top scorer on a Galaga machine that day, you were doing something right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because someone's going to come in and put up a couple 100,000 on a Galaga every day, right?
Yep.
So I think that it's interesting because you get a different texture. And I think the more people participating, participation begets participation. So I think that that's good too.
Absolutely.
So I think the answer to the question is there's enough of a diverse range of, you've got, JoJo's Venture, which is a world record, but we don't really know what those limits are yet. It was heavily played in T20. But next week another game might hit the floor that was not in T20 or is brand new. And that game hasn't really been known or tested too much yet, and we haven't really hit that limit yet. I mean, I don't think there are certain games that we just haven't even scratched the surface on. Mozzie's pointed out a score that he had on some racing game that was like this
Hydra.
boat. No, yeah, Hydra.
Was that it?
Yeah. And he was like, that score is nothing. Like, somebody should take that score.
Yeah.
Well, that's a score he called it low-hanging. He called it low-hanging fruit, not me. Okay. So it really is a wide range. Even the Stun Runner score. Like, I was playing Stun Runner for a little while, and I was like, oh, this is a score that's gettable, because it didn't represent like that high of a level of expertise. Although it's a good score, it's not like up here, where it's like, oh my God, how am I ever going to be able to take that? It's a high level, but not where it's unachievable. And I think people will continue to come in and be interested. Games like Spectre Files are great for that.
Mm-hmm.
More casual scores have been set on Spectre Files than almost any other game, right?
For sure.
There's a lot of scores on that game, yeah.
It's been interesting, and for those just joining us, we have our special guest here today, Matt Walters, former Gamer of the Year, talking about all his time at the Galloping Ghost Arcade. And again, if you have questions for Matt Walters, make sure you put them in our stream chat.
Yeah, you want to open up for questions? Or?
Sure,
Yeah.
let's
I did
post some questions.
want to answer one that I saw on Facebook earlier. Someone asked what microphones we were using, and I can almost see the model number right here, but I don't know. I gotta look. It's Neewer, 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 model NW-700. So sorry for speaking directly into the mic, but someone did ask what model microphones. We have these running to a mixer, and then that goes to the computer. So.
Do you think that sometimes some of the gamers here get almost... I see players get frustrated that they'll walk up and they haven't taken the top score in one try.
Right.
Do you think that lends to there being room on so many scores that, like, again, combined with the amount of games coming out?
Right. People are really achievement-based these days, and what's interesting is, I think that one of the things that would be an interesting idea to explore is the idea. We used to have this idea at the arcade where we had these achievements and you could do certain things, and it was more geared towards casuals. But I think that it is like people do. I see casuals a lot. Look up at the machine. Look down at the machine at what they're doing. They're like, oh wow,
And their face just drops. Yeah.
yeah. So, but by the same token, I think that you have to start somewhere, and I think that what I think is fun about the arcade is the learning process, and I think that's the part that I think is still there for you to discover, and I think that it is hard to engage someone when there's these huge scores up there, but I think the community is engaging. I think that when I see people at the arcade that I don't know that well that are coming around more regularly, I try to talk to them. A couple of casuals were playing some games and asking some questions a couple Mondays ago, and I was helping them out with
On Spectre Files?
On Spectre Files.
Yeah.
And then there's some other people who were asking me about Tron, which is a game I didn't even know that well before March, and now I consider myself pretty good at the game. Not top level, but pretty good. And so it's fun to do that, and I think that I think the other thing about this that I'll say is that as members of the arcade community that have benefited so much from the winning Gamer of the Year awards and the accolades and trading cards that come with it and kudos and all that stuff, we kind of have a responsibility to sort of take care of the community and sort of usher people in and take care of that and make sure it grows and water that plant. Like, it's kind of important that's part of what I see as my responsibility. Like I want people to be engaged in this. I love it when somebody new comes to the arcade. They're there for once a month, and I see them every week. Tom Christie's a good example of this.
Yeah, he's there every week now.
He's there every week, and it's great to see him every week, and he is a great addition to the community.
He's starting to put up some serious scores. Like his Mr. Do score was really
Mr.
good.
Do score is amazing. It's something I could
over 400K.
Yeah, I played that game for 3.5 months and I could never get that score.
Mm-hmm.
And and everybody is so different. But what's cool is everybody who does dedicate themselves to just working on a game or whatever, they make progress.
They will. Yeah.
And that's the thing that I see is paramount to the gaming experience. Is, hey, you can come here and you can do something. And like, not everybody who goes bowling in bowling leagues is going to bowl 300 every time. And I kind of feel like we lose our focus from, if I don't get this score, then it's terrible. Like, if I get 184,000 and the score is 185,000, well, then it's a terrible game. Well, no, you did a very good job. You just didn't get the score. You made progress. Speaking for myself, sometimes I'll double a score, personal best on a game, but I'll fall short of the record. And I'll have to think about it later and be like, wait a second, that's fine. I did this in
well on
one
your
day.
way.
Yeah, and so I think that as members of the community and as gamers who've set scores and stuff, it's kind of part of our responsibility to sort of, foster that community.
Well, and you've definitely always been one of the standout ambassadors and always been so welcoming to new players and all the players in general, not even just here, but again, you've traveled to other arcades all over the place, which is it's awesome to see that passion for gaming and the arcade community in general. So that's always a thank you for everything that you bring to the community.
Well, thank you for having the community, because I'll say the other thing about this is that arcade gaming really has become a bigger part of my life, and it is something that I really cherish and enjoy as a hobby, and I've gotten so much out of it that I want to give back, and so when I go out to the other arcades in the area, and I don't get out to them as often as I'd like, I don't get to Pixel Blast or Prince or Underground Retrocade, as often as I would like, I haven't even been out to the Joliet pinball place. I haven't been out to a lot of other places that are around in the area up to Wisconsin yet. And I know there's another one opening up soon. Headless Horseman will be opening up at some point. I've been out to Fun Spot, and I was out to Pinball Wizards when it was still open in New Hampshire. But You know, I love meeting people who love to do this too. You know, some of the moments I cherish the most are just hanging out at Fun Spot with people I just met and talking about what we love most about some of these games. I had the opportunity to meet and get to know Dave Nelson and some of those guys out there when I was out there for the tournaments. And even though we were going back and forth in the manufacturers tournament, Dave Nelson and I just took a few moments just to talk, you know, and it's so interesting you discover things about yourself as a gamer. You discover things about yourself as a human being when you share those moments with gamers. And I met people from all over the country because that tournament draws so many people because of casual interest in the King of Kong and other things. The history of Fun Spot in general as a landmark, you know. When this place is around for 38 years, I'm sure we're going to have thousands of people coming from all over the world to this place.
I mean, speaking of that, there's been just so many international travelers, like
There
just
have
today.
Oh yeah.
Today?
Yeah, even just today. Well,
I talked to two people, one from Canada,
one guy from Edmonton, yeah.
Tennessee.
Yeah,
and
one from
it's
Tennessee,
like-
just today.
We had somebody from Spain earlier this year.
I think so.
We had people from Japan recently
Mhm.
come in.
Yeah.
And were just blown away taking pictures, right? They were just walking around the arcade taking pictures.
We have some friends coming in for Pinball Expo. They come in every year, and so excited for them to visit again from Japan.
Speaking of pinball,
That was my next question.
I love
Segue.
pinball so much. It's such a good thing. The rooms look so good too, and the games are in such great shape. I mean, you've put so much work into that.
Well, and I have to, as always, give a big shout out to Ken Walker, Zach, and Maurice and Shady, Doug Fox, who they spend so much time fine-tuning those machines. And as much as, like, I love pinball, it's a different thing for me than the video side.
Right.
I don't have the knowledge base. That is very much more... It's just different. in a
It's
lot of
physical
ways.
engineering. A lot of it's like physical engineering, right?
And I'm talking about again, on the knowledge-based side.
Oh, you mean
I
like the
can-
history of
I
the
can-
games and the...
Yeah, I can tell you every year any game on the video side came out.
Right.
Pinball, I know what we have.
Right. Right.
But it's different, a different thing. Are you as the scoring is so different for pinball?
Right, of course.
Are you as competitive?
It's interesting because I don't play as much pinball because I have so many projects at the arcade all the time, and I like the project-based thing at the arcade a lot. But I love pinball so much.
What's your favorite pin?
My favorite pin is definitely Attack from Mars, and my runner-up is Twilight Zone. But those are like right at the top, and because Dennis's Place for Games over on First Avenue in Lawrence, that was Cumberland, right, and Lawrence. When I was out there, I used to go there, and it was 1993 or 1994, and the lineup of the 5 or 6 pinball machines, I remember it like it was yesterday. T2, there was Whitewater, there was Indiana Jones, there was Twilight Zone, there was Attack from Mars, and there was one other game. Oh, it was Fishtails, and there was one other game that was another. Oh, it was Theater of Magic, Addams Family. It was Addams Family. So it was that lineup of games, and those are
Good lineup
like
of
7
games,
incredible pinball machines. And my friend Jeff, who's been here before, he is a competitive pinball player in Seattle, and he has a pinball league, and there's a specific pinball scene in Seattle, which is really really well honed, and he competes in that, and we talk about all the time. But I'm not somebody who has the when I stand there and play pinball, I don't have the physical understanding of how to manipulate the machine in the way that the top level gamers do. Like, they can tell you, okay, well, the dead pass, the different techniques. I don't really know that, and it's not intuitive to me to do. Love to score. Love to make all the door panels go down in Twilight Zone. Did it once at this Twilight Zone. I got the whatever that Lost in the Zone award is. I did the other thing for Attack from Mars once, where it was you defeat all the aliens in all the cities and something crazy happens. I don't know. So, this is are these questions for me, by the way?
They can be.
Do I gravitate to a certain genre of game when in competitive mindset? Yes, I would say that I play a lot more shmups in competitive mindset, and in casual games, if I'm gonna play casually, I'll tend to play classics more often because I just enjoy the simplicity of it. Miss Pac-Man Turbo, any Pac-Man. I was playing Junior Pac-Man. Q-Bird, the faster Q-Bird, of course. And the console, it's really interesting because I don't have a console after 2001. I've got like a PlayStation 1 or something. And that's the only console I have, and I have like a couple. I think I've got like Final Fantasy 7 and 9. I think I've got like Gran Turismo. But I haven't had a console since then. I had a DS that I was playing for a little while, back when those were popular, right? Now, the last thing I played at home, I replayed Ultima 4, which is a 1985 or 84 Lord British game for the PC, which is an RPG.
Gores would like that.
Gores loves that game. We've talked about that before. And I just downloaded for the phone, for the iPhone, the Myst sequel, Riven, because I love those types of puzzle games. And I never looked up the cheats for the sequels to Myst, which I heard the sequels to Myst were like ridiculously hard. Like you could solve Myst, you could poke around and solve it in a few hours. But I heard that and so I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna give this a shot to see what I can do with this now. Now that I'm a fully formed adult. Because one of the first games I played as a child was this really primitive RPG on an Apple II Plus called The Wizard and the Princess that responded to syntax commands.
Oh no!
And so you'd be like, look, rock, and you'd look at the rock, and then you see the scorpion behind it, and if you said get rock, the scorpion would kill you. But it was like they would draw the lines on the screen, and then there would be like this one scene. There's a cactus there, and I would always get to this one spot. I was like 6 years old at the time, right? And I wouldn't know what the syntax was to do the next thing, right? And 31 years later, I looked it up, and I was like, oh my god! I never said climb down.
Yeah.
If I had said climb down, I would have solved the game. So
that was the end of the game.
That was the end of the game. It was I was stuck in the last command. So that's what I've been playing at home recently. Stuff like that.
What's something, or is there a game not on the arcade floor yet that you hope one day goes out?
I would love, yes, Quantum is a game I would love to play. I love Quantum. It's a trackball game where you draw lines. It's like these colored lines, and the more circles you complete,
Like kicks.
like kicks, but it's more. It's you draw these circles in space.
Okay.
And it was, we played that at Fun Spot, and I actually got tendonitis in my hand so badly that I had to switch to my left hand and learn it left-handed.
Yeah.
And I did, and I got my highest score left-handed, but it was really funny because that's a great game. Love to see Wild Ride because I really enjoyed playing that. What was the other game recently that I played? It was a shmup. And it was Mushihime-sama. The original Mushihime-sama is a beautiful game, a absolutely fantastically beautiful game.
Yeah.
That is very well balanced, has great mechanics, and would be a wonderful addition to the shmup room, aka the hot room. The hardest boss that I've ever played against. That's a great question.
And one.
What's that?
and beat
and
them?
beat. Yeah, well, that's another.
Another question. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of if there. Well, I mean, like, I want to say the final boss of. Well, I mean, because the thing about like some of these games is, you're talking about Dodonpachi Daiojo, and the level 4 boss is harder than any final boss I've ever faced, right? Or almost harder than any final boss I've faced. So. When we qualify this thing to be like, okay, well, what's the hardest? There's these levels where you're sort of looking at it from a scaling perspective, from how hard is this game? So I would definitely say that the level 4 Dodonpachi Daijojo boss is the hardest boss I've faced so far. So I haven't even gotten to the final boss in that game, and that's.
Is there a true last boss second loop thing?
There's a the crazy thing about White Label is you can only unlock the second loop with certain conditions. You have to either get all the Bs and all the levels. You have to. And the same thing for the hardest stage. Is the Dodonpachi Daijojo is the hardest game I've ever played by far, and level 1-4 of that game, or whatever you want to call it, it's 1-4 of that game. It represents a level that I spent months and months and months and months playing this game. I could not get past level 4 of the first loop, and level 5 is the last level of Dodonpachi Daijojo. This thing goes to a second loop only if you get like all the Bs in some of the stages, or chain everything, or get a certain number of points.
So there's unlock requirements for...
Unlock, or don't die a certain number of times, don't use a certain number of bombs, right? So, the crazy thing about that is, when you start the second loop, I believe they only give you 1 life.
Okay, I think that's a common thing. They take away all your extra lives.
And it was like insane. Like you have to basically clear level 1, 2-1 of Dodonpachi Daijojo, White Label, or you're not going to get anywhere in that game. And that's why they ultimately made some of the changes they made
for Black Label.
Yeah. I think they were just messing with people. To be honest with you, I think they were
it's
like, well, you know what, guys, we took a game off, we licensed this to somebody else. What was it, IGS for Dodonpachi 2
for B-Storm, yeah.
B-Storm.
We gave you guys a game that was kind of different. Let's just ramp it up a little bit, and they just put it up there, just so hard, so ridiculous. Like I would be seeing bullets in my sleep, like as I cried myself to sleep from how hard that game was.
Should we rein it in? Start closing out?
Yeah.
So we haven't seen too many questions, and I think I got to hit back to the arcade because
Proto Spark
Nick's
is
over there.
saying that we need Time Gal. If you
Is that a
ever see
Laserdisc?
one, what's that?
The Laserdisc?
Laserdisc game. Definitely, if anyone ever sees one for sale, let us know.
It's on your most wanted list.
It is.
How big is the most wanted list?
It's right now. I want to say it is 15. It's like 16 games right now.
Wow, that's not that many.
No, it's they're all pretty unobtainable. There's a few that I could, if it's still fun to get them if we're spending the right money for them. Like you can always just go out and buy whatever if you throw enough money at it. And there's still the few that I want to get good prices.
Do you want to get organically?
Yeah.
Just finding
Not
them in
just
a
go
warehouse.
out and
You could find a collector that's restored it beautifully and.
Time Gal is one that I, even with all the money, I couldn't get one. It's definitely, there's supposed to be a guy that knows a guy that knows a guy that might have one that won't sell one. So
It's an urban legend.
yeah,
We've got quite a few people asking about Combat Con. Is there anything you want to say on that? You get asked constantly, don't you?
I do. We get a lot of questions about Combat Con. I read recently about it not happening again due to fallouts and everything. I can assure everybody that we are definitely all on good terms with everybody. Don't believe everything you hear online unless it's coming from
The
us
source.
direct. We had Daniel Pacina and Rich DeVizio out here, and of course John Parrish. So everybody is still. We're all good friends, so it's there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on. So we will keep you posted on Combat Con. I know everybody is so anxious. It's so funny you see those this day in history posts with it. Combat Con resurfaces, and then
Oh yeah, like the 1 year later post that comes up.
Yeah,
Here's your
yeah.
Facebook memory. Yeah.
yeah, we're not going to say what's going on yet, but it's definitely something that's being discussed, and who knows? Who knows? We'll let everybody know when it's that time, but we know everybody's anxious for Combat Con, so more soon.
Cool. You got anything else? What is that?
I don't know. Well, it's a good question, though.
Well, I guess unless there's any. Oh yes, let's definitely post that. We're going to be posting the GoFundMe link for Sean Quigley. Sean Quigley passed away last week, who was such an amazing member of this community. They are doing a GoFundMe for his expenses for funeral and everything. So if you can, please donate to this. Help his family out. It's been amazing to see how many people in the community have already donated.
Yeah, so many people have, and I looked through the names of all the donors. You can see who's donated, and it's like I recognize like a lot of these names are arcade people that I know.
Yeah, it's so generous, and even people that haven't even been here, that just have an appreciation for this community. Some got to know Sean through various events and talked to him, I believe, at one of our Spectre Files events and through Monday Mysteries, and he was always such a just solid part of the arcade, and
Yeah.
will be deeply missed. And
Absolutely, and it just, the more I reflect upon Sean and his presence at the arcade, the more meaningful it was that, Sean really knew what it was like to be part of a community and really understood how to contextualize everything, and his attitude at the arcade was always really a positive source for so many people. He just wanted to be there. He wanted to participate. He also had to battle through so much in his life that he was a model for how you approach challenges in general, because we're all thrown challenges, but his example is something I will carry with me, because he never let it get him down, and that was so amazing to realize, especially after he passed, when you reflect upon those things. So I do want to answer that question.
Can you?
I can definitely not at this point 1cc Castlevania whip only. In 1987, when I was playing this game on NES console, I want to say that I could definitely beat Dracula whip only, because I did it a number of times. But the one part of the game that I struggle with is not the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper whip only is not bad.
Oh,
it's
that's
actually
what
Frankenstein's monster and the Hunchback.
Oh, really?
Are because if that Hunchback starts moving, you are in trouble.
He just gets all over the place.
And so you have to really understand how to beat that, relatively quickly, or know where to go. Everything else in that game can be navigated, but that ball, and if you have to start over in that level, whip only, it's so hard to get back, to that point. So I couldn't do it now, and the score represents a lot of padding right now on level 5 with red skeletons and going back and forth and stuff like that. So it's kind of more just like that kind of thing. The second loop in that game is really interesting and hard. And
It's all the Medusa heads through a lot of places.
yeah, and there's so many hard parts of that game, and I look forward to the day that one day we can set a track in that machine that's one life only.
One life only. You must 1cc.
You must 1cc. That's what I want for that game. That and some of the other games like that as well.
well, and we will be going through as Orcade progresses
Mhm.
with its relaunch. We definitely want to talk with you on a plethora of games.
Oh, I'd love to.
I think your insight would be most valuable.
Would love to. One day I'm going to finish all that. I have 584 scores in arcade, and it's so funny because I looked at the list of the games I still have left to do. I still haven't played like 250 games at the arcade. Can you believe that? It's ridiculous.
It's a lot of games there.
I've played 584 games on arcade. Some of them I'm not at this arcade. I still have 250. Like, what?
So if you play a game, you automatically put in the score no matter what it is?
No, I haven't. There's some games that I've not submitted a score for because I couldn't.
Like
really,
you have to beat the game.
No, a
submit
really
score.
funny one is there's some beat 'em up in the last row near 720.
Combat Tribes.
Yeah, Combat Tribes. So you
Yes,
have
you have to beat the
pass.
first level.
And I'm so bad at beat 'em ups that like I can't even get past the first level.
Yeah.
So I played a few games, but I couldn't set the score. So that's like one of the C's that I haven't done yet. I know that.
Yeah.
There are a couple games like that.
Art of Fighting 3, I haven't done that one move
Because
yet.
you do have to beat the game.
Yeah, you have to beat the
It's
game.
like a fastest completion.
Yeah.
Like I know Virtua Fighter 2 is another one.
A lot of fighting games I haven't put scores in on yet.
One day.
One day.
How would we fix that? Like fastest completion tracks. Can't really do anything about it.
It's going to have to be a one-by-one
Yeah.
situational, like re-examine the game. And it's true, there's a lot of games that really do need to be re-examined, I think, just to make it fun and competitive, and it'll be interesting. It's
Like
something.
Karnov.
Karnov,
That's a good
there's
example.
so many games that need additional rules, and it's a big undertaking with Orcade.
What was that game that you guys put on the floor last year that you had like the level and then it was like
Boomeranger.
Yeah, Boomeranger.
Yeah.
I liked that wrinkle a lot, where it was like the level was the first part of the score and then the
That
second
represents
part.
the 100,000 digits or something.
Yeah.
We did
yeah.
that with like was it Fantasy Zone?
Before
And
when
this-
we had the time trial,
Yeah.
before, like we made it so your level you got to was the first digit, and then your money that you collected was the rest of it. I think.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was until we got the second board.
Yes.
Right. All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you guys for having me.
All right.
This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And come out to the arcade, have some fun with us, and please, if any of you see me at the arcade and recognize me, please don't hesitate to talk me up. I love talking about arcade games. I love talking to people.
You're there most Mondays, right?
Yeah, usually a lot of us are there on Mondays because of the Monday Mystery, and because we just like to hang out with each other. I mean, go figure, right?
Cool. Well, thanks everybody. Thank you again to, as always, to Pete Hahn for all his technical help and co-hosting, and of course, thank you to our special guest Matt Walters,
Thank you, Doc.
Former Gamer of the Year.
former Gamer of the Year.
Can't forget that part.
Can't forget the
Of
kudos.
course. So thanks everybody. I'm Doc Mack from the Galloping Ghost Arcade, and we hope to see you around the arcade soon. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks.